So how about Albo's trip to China this week? How was it? How was the whining and the whinging and the moaning and the groaning? Albo and Co, Penny and so on, have restored relations between Australia and China. Shattered by the ineptitude of the last mob, they brought $20 billion in the door. They've reset the China-Australia friendship, and they've reset relations with our Pacific neighbours to stave off creeping Chinese money diplomacy in the Pacific Ocean. The farmers are happy. The fishermen are happy too. We've got barley and wine and lobster trade back. But oh, how they cried. They even dusted off the relics of prime ministerships past. ScoMo was there today. Alexander Downer, Timor Bugging Man, Tony Abbott, and of course, John Winston Howard. They got them all up to have a bitch, to have a biatch. How they desperately, the Murdoch when news goes to die media tried to concoct a scandal on Sky Noise and other American media. Like Murdoch's flagship title, The Israelian. The gripes are so finicky, so minuscule, that they do not bear mentioning here. Okay, Albo might have been stood up for a moment by Xi Jinping. Okay, he might not be tough enough on Taiwan. Not really our business. But the US grovelers, the US media, because News Corp is owned in the US. Delaware, in fact. The little tax haven secrecy jurisdiction of Delaware. But the US grovelling media is so wretched now that Epstein's mate Donald Trump is spoiling their geopolitical party, ruining America's credibility in the world. So they've got nothing. Just whining about Albo's very successful trip to China, where he sort of hung about, went for a walk on the Great Wall, shook a few hands, listened to a bit of music. That's what you do. You just turn up. It's like a party. Say hello, be a nice guy. And he does it well, actually, Albo. He'd make a good diplomat. But what about? How is this for a scam? Is this going to be our scam of the week, this cherished, prestigious prize? Good old Angus Taylor, the Minister for the Cayman Islands. Sorry, the Shadow Treasurer. How does good old Angus not win scam of the week this week? Committing Australia to a US war against China. Yay. What a great idea. Angus, we suggest that you and your family lead by example and get decked out in the fatigues, put the night vision goggles on, and lead the way boldly to war against China to save Taiwan. While Angus was talking up the war with absolutely zero logic against a nation with nuclear submarines. They got 60 or 70 submarines who could take out Pine Gap in a jiffy, while we wait 20 years for our nuclear submarines not to arrive under the AUKUS steel. And so they were very annoyed that there was Albo smiling, laid back, pressing the flesh. They were livid on Sky Noise. Peter Credlin, let's quote Sky, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has been warned by Sky News' Peter Credlin. His stance on Taiwan risks making the US feel as if it is doing all the heavy lifting, poor dears, to promote peace in the region.
But first, since arriving in China, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has been peppered with questions about whether Australia would help defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese attack. If Australia remains committed to its long-standing US security partnership and America does defend Taiwan, Australia will have to be involved.
Petter. Warn, she says. Promote peace, she says. And there's good old Barnaby. Oh, we've missed the man. Dear old Barnaby. The go-to man for a gripe. Barnaby said he felt awkward that Albo waited alone and then semi-bowed to Xi. Careful of communist crocodiles, warned Barnaby. Sorry, old cobber Barnaby, but where's that 600,000 drought relief report again? Is it on anybody's desk yet, or was it really just a series of text messages for the 600k? That's value for money, isn't it? Yet scam of the week is never a lay-down misère, because many are the scams in politics and business. There is vivid competition from the war crimes lobby again, from Benjamin Netanyahu's lobby in Australia, hard on the heels. And we'll be hearing about it a lot in Parliament this week when it kicks off on Tuesday or Wednesday. Again, the first session for the new government. Hard on the heels of the latest terrorism incidents, terrorism in inverted commas, the burnt synagogue door and the Melbourne restaurant kerfuffle by allegedly violent pro-Hamas protesters who actually got bashed up. Here came our special anti-Semitism envoy, Jillian Segal. Make that very special anti-Semitism envoy, Jillian Segal, with her landmark suite of recommendations on combating anti-Semitism. It's a suite of racist recommendations, supremacist. What is Albo's game plan here? Should he play along? Should he just say, anti-Semitism is a dreadful problem, far greater than domestic violence, Indigenous disadvantage, homelessness, and of course child abuse? Don't worry about those things. Don't worry about Benjamin Netanyahu's even bombed a Catholic church this week, wiped out every mosque and hospital in Gaza, bombed Damascus, kicked off a new war, another war crime, bombed Damascus, amid his suite of weekly war crimes as they starve an entire population and shoot them at food distribution points. Don't see much coverage of that in our media. It's very careful coverage when it occurs. Just on a related incident, Nine Entertainment had a court win against the Israel lobby this week, who tried on a contempt of court action. The judge chucked it out. He found basically that it was a waste of time and money. They, the Lawyers for Israel, the same mob who lobbied Ita Buttrose, the chair of the ABC, former chair, to oust Antoinette Lattouf, a journalist, from the ABC. Well, this mob was miffed because they claimed that Nine Entertainment had breached a suppression order relating to the Antoinette Lattouf case. They took down the names anyway. There should never have been a suppression order of these people that had decided to interject themselves into the ABC process. So this suppression order basically should never have been. The extent of it is to protect a bunch of urges acting for the interests of a foreign government trying to get an Australian journalist sacked from a public agency, the ABC, for telling the truth about war crimes, for quoting Amnesty International. Anyway, the judge chucked that one out. What a waste of public resources that was, bringing this pettifogging into the courts. In fact, we were mentioned just incidentally in the MWM at length in the South Australian Supreme Court this week. That was another phishing mission, some lawyers trying to shut down the whistleblower Roxy Misco, send her to jail, 400 court incidents she's had, trying to put her in jail and trying to find out who the source behind our story was. I mean, seriously, we pay for this stuff. We fund the courts. But having nicely battered off this vexatious action by the Israel lobby, Nine crowned its media glory. We've got to give them credit for this. With this cutting-edge, deep public interest news exclusive about the bloke having a coldie in the beer garden with his mate, as you do, when they fell backwards, cascading off their chair. But get this, here is the global exclusive. One of the boys managed, even while falling backward in the beer garden with his beer, he managed to save his beer. There it was on the National 9 News. There's a few other things, of course. Bradfield result, the closest contest in the recent election, is being challenged by the Liberal Party. It'll be an interesting one because the Teals won by a whisker, the closest vote in the country. Matty Comyn, and we did this in the last video or the one before, the boss of the CBA, Australia's biggest bank, he ruffled feathers this week at the big end of town when he eschewed the conventional big business lobby wisdom, cutting taxes and cutting wages, and called for caps on super. What an outrage. He called to prioritise wealth taxes over income taxes. Outrageous! And he said that cutting corporate income tax is not a priority. Just deplorable stuff. But eclipsing Albo's trip to China and the chorus, the descant of soprano whinging in the mainstream media, there was our intrepid Antisemitism envoy Jillian Segal, the Israel lobbyist, and the very, very, very special envoy. So last Thursday, hard on the heels of the latest so-called terrorism attacks, the burnt synagogue door in Melbourne, and the stoush in the Melbourne restaurant, Miznon. These were dubbed, of course, by the press as Melbourne's Night of Terror. But this week, remember the Adas Israel synagogue terrorism attack, sort of 150 days ago or so? There was an arrest this week. Again, same pattern, yet again. Some 20-year-old bloke, some ne'er-do-well, arrested with no apparent ties to any political cause or organisation for stealing a car in relation to this terrorism plot. No news on the mastermind. Police are doing their best, they said, but we are not getting to the people who are planning these attacks and arranging for them to be carried out. Well, you never do, but that doesn't stop the press and the politicians from imposing what they believe is intent, terrorism intent, on all this spate. So as Parliament resumes this week, the noise level will be heavy. It will rise again, because by stealth, the Netanyahu lobby appears to have, without a referendum, established a voice to Parliament. We haven't got an Indigenous voice to Parliament, but we have a Netanyahu voice to Parliament. The Voice! Now, we've got to hand it to Jill. This is slick. She does have flair. There's been a dozen mysterious incidents which have already changed the laws of the country because they were deemed to be terrorism. They were later found not to be terrorism. And when it turned out that they were executed by a bunch of, guys that look a bit down on their luck, who were paid by somebody whose identity we do not know as yet and probably will never find out. I wonder who that would be. Zero political motives, zero political views, just about money, being paid by some apparently undetectable party from overseas. Who could that possibly be? So what have we got? The big one, the Dural Caravan Antisemitism terror attack, the biggest terror plot in Australian history, they called it. We've got the anti-Semitic egging of the girls in Bondi, which turned out to be a couple of scallywags, a couple of teenagers joyriding in mum's car. Got the AJA's Bondi ATM $50 anti-Semitic banknote scam, on which police just recently shut the case file. Undaunted, Jill pens a report from her $30 million Darling Point harbourside shack, apparently nonplussed by her husband bankrolling a racist right-wing hate group, Advance Australia, and calls for the introduction of the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism to be implemented across the board in Australia. So how does Albo deal with this? The IHRA definition conflates anti-Semitism with criticism of Israel. How does Albo deal with this? Well, he's in a bit of a no-win situation. He'll get punished for weakness if he takes any notice of it whatsoever, for not taking any notice, sorry. He'll be punished for weakness if he doesn't take any notice of it. Because Segal, you see, is calling for the stripping of university funding if there's any criticism of Israel. She's calling for, well, not any unacceptable, we'll get to that in a moment, criticism of Israel. She's calling for arts funding too to be stripped for the same. She's calling for a media monitoring operation for anti-Semitism under the IHRA definition. Presumably, the idea here is to punish media offenders, criminalise it, criticism of Israel, mid-genocide. But if Albo ignores it, he gets slammed by the he gets slammed by the Israel lobby for being anti-Semitic. So here's your play, Albo. No charge, mate. Just maybe do something about the ambulance chasers. Here's your plan. You respond with deep gravity about this critically important, urgent need to address the alarming rise in anti-Semitism in Australia. Da-da-da, a few nice, earnest words. And then you call for a detailed study into the anti-Semitic attacks with real examples. None of this sort of, hurty-feeling stuff. We want real examples of anti-Semitism, empirical evidence, and as you are being called upon to criminalise unacceptable criticism of Israel, you ask for concrete examples of what constitutes this unacceptable criticism. Concrete examples. Actual examples, actual evidence, not just feelings. Is it criticising Israel for bombing hospitals, churches and mosques? Well, she didn't like that, Jill. The Australian government, when it came out and criticised Israel for bombing a hospital in Gaza, they bombed all 36 of them now more than once, didn't like that at all. So what is unacceptable? What is unreasonable? Let's see it. Let's have a list. The bottom line is that all this stuff is unreasonable. It's unreasonable for a foreign lobby which has utterly failed to condemn the atrocities of the Israel government and just wants everybody to shut up about it. Well, if there is anti-Semitism, we know who the culprits are. So Scam of the Week goes to Jillian Segal. All this could end tomorrow if whoever it is stopped with this fake anti-Semitism attacks, these fake terror plots. And if they just came out, all the Zionist lobbies, and just said, we condemn the actions of the Israel government. We want a ceasefire in Gaza. We want peace. What about a peace summit? Why don't they call for that? What is the scam here among this plethora of mini scams? Check out our Michael West Media coverage of the massive Australian government contracts to entities involved in war crimes. This is the story. Elbit, Raphael, the Israeli weapons manufacturers, a host of others. We've detailed how our superannuation is being invested in this stuff. And I'll tell you what, the superannuation bodies and Australian Super and so on, they are ducking for cover. Nobody wants to discuss it because they know that they are in contravention of international law. There's public funds too being abused via defence contracts, 900 million to Elbit and so on. The future fund's in there with its ears pinned back as an investor in Elbit. These things are actual breaches of international law. They are demonstrable. Follow the money trail. They are factual breaches. And the media, the good old fossil media, is yet to touch them. It's left for people like yours truly on our skinny budget. They breach the Geneva Convention, clearly. They breach Australia's human rights obligations, treaties, not a bunch of fake terror plots. That's not the story. The facts and the evidence of Australia bankrolling war crimes. That is the story. The mainstream media is even yet to recant its little, which kicked it all off. 40 babies beheaded, babies in ovens, babies strung up on clotheslines, mass rapes, no evidence for any of it. No investigation into October 7. And yet they all got on board as one and trotted out all this nonsense. That is the story. Please like, share and comment on this happy topic in the section below, because we're going to hear about it a lot in the coming days when Parliament resumes. Throw us a few bucks on Patreon if you can, because we're the only ones doing this sort of thing, looking at the actual facts, having a dig, and have a great week. Let's watch that Parliament with interest. It's going to be fun when they all come back, the boys and girls.